Okay, I just want to stick this in here at the beginning as I'm wrapping up. But I can clearly, the end of the walkthrough is done, but I want to stick this in here real quick. There are a lot of walkthroughs of this deck that are available. Quick walkthroughs, short walkthroughs of this deck. This has been out for over a year. It's going into the second edition. So there's a lot of those out there. I can see where this might be frustrating video for some people because it's me walking through and experiencing it, working it out, trying to figure out the nuances, seeing where the balance is. I feel as if this is going to be a deck that I'm going to be working with a lot in my own spiritual practice and in those types of readings that mean a lot to me, such as my ancestor readings or web readings, where it's really kind of getting into the depth of things. So I have a sense that this is going to be a powerful deck for me, and so I'm really working my way through and sort of figuring those nuances out through this through the course of this video, which A, makes it long, which all of my things are, and B, there are some repetitive nature where it's like, oh, okay, is this really happening here? Let's try to find that and see how it works. So if you're just looking for a quick walkthrough of the cards, this is probably not the one for you. This is my first impressions and my sorting through the nuances of what I think is actually a really powerful deck. Hello everybody and happy Earth Day to you. Today is, I believe, the 22nd. Yeah, April 22nd. So this is 2019, in case you're watching this in the future. It may not be happy Earth Day for you, but it is actually Earth Day. As I am recording this and putting it up. And so I thought it would be a really great time to do a walkthrough of the Oracle, the Illuminated Earth Oracle. Now, this is an Oracle deck that is by Claire Mack. It came out actually last year. I'm late to this particular parade. I know this is the first edition. She is in the process of a Kickstarter for the second edition, which none of the cards have changed. I believe that the card stock is going to be different. I think she's changed printers, but I don't know any specifics about that. But I do know that the images are the same, so that hasn't changed. My friend Patrick found a shop that had two of the first editions left in it, so he bought one and I bought one, and so that way we didn't have to wait for the Kickstarter for the second edition. So there's a lot of walkthroughs of this out there already. It's been out for a while. People seem to really love it. I'm just on this one, I'm a little late to the game, and I want to still go through it myself, and it's Earth Day, so I thought that doing a walkthrough of the Illuminated Earth Oracle would be a great way to do that. I absolutely love the text here because it's on a light space. You can't see it. It's a little bit harder to see, and except for when you kind of wiggle it. But if you look closely, like at the T, you can see that it's done in sort of text of an illuminated manuscript. Turn off my phone, and so of course that adds to the sort of connotation of Earth, but then the illuminated manuscript that is Earth itself, I suppose. So it has, it's a very beautifully matte box, but then it has gold foil highlighting here and in this circle. I think that's the only two places. You see green foliage and stars above on the top. It's just a beautiful box. Inside, of course, not of course, but is green. Makes sense. It's illuminated Earth, and I think of greens, obviously browns, all colors, but I do think of green related to Earth, so we have that there. We have a little white, what I would say is a little white book that goes into right away just into the cards, and there seems to be about a little paragraph for each of the cards. I'm okay with that for oracles. I really don't often, and depending, unless it's a deck with a specific system or something like that, I'm good with like a nice paragraph of text. That is plenty for me to usually get to where I'm going to need to go. So that most of the little white book is that, and this is literally a little white book. This is kind of low Scarabeo size, not too many pages here. The art, Let's see what they say. All of the cards are painted and collaged using a variety of mediums, vintage prints, and hand marble paper. I fell in love with the marbling process as it seems to mimic creation itself in the swirling of water and pigment, often resulting in organic designs that resemble satellite images of the earth. Many of the images are intentionally minimal and abstract, allowing for spaciousness. Others reflect the intricate detail and patterns found in nature and metaphorically in a person's life. This last part is important. There are 12 cards that depict people, and they are from paintings in my own collection that hold special significance for me. They represent the human element. So this is the illuminated earth, and there are humans on the earth, right? And so they represent the human element, the mind and soul of the seeker here on earth, whose journey is necessarily integrated with the planet and the cosmos. They do have symbols. Now, I have talked about this deck a little bit with Patrick, who got his before me. There are symbols here. I don't know that I'm actually going to use these too much because I do feel like the cards themselves really speak to that. So they have a little cross thing here that's just about origin, wholeness, completion, and state of being. Positive associations and negative associations. You can pretty well tell, you know, for example, a card that says obstacle or a card that says grief. You know that is a negative association or conflict or an absence or a challenge. So I feel like the titles kind of make this a little bit obsolete. There is a star also that is an intersection of matter with consciousness, human influence, and choice. So, you know, maybe these two will be interesting. I'll keep it out and pay attention to it. But it seemed to me as if the titles were pretty much intuitive in and of themselves, and this kind of didn't seem to be necessary. But we'll see as we go. I think that's it. Yeah, and that's it. So this is very much a little white book, but I think that the point here is to sink into the images, and if a title is good enough and the title and the images together is a good functioning thing that comes together, I don't go often to guidebooks for oracle decks, so this to me is fine. Excuse me. The backs are stunning. What I'm excited about in this deck is that there is a beautiful use of textures. I really look for, and I have to work at sometimes textures in the medium of watercolor. You do have to look for granulating paints and add salt and do different things to really pull out texture in watercolor. And this isn't a watercolor deck. She said she uses in multiples of different types of mediums. But it's something that I really look for and work hard for in my own personal art. So I really resonated with a lot of the use of textures here and the color palette. The other side of the box is green as well as the front side of the box. It does have the divots. I feel like some modern deck creators are not having those divots, and it can be a real pain in the butt to get a box open without those, especially if it's a tighter box. This feels actually like a good box. The back just tells us there is a 63 card oracle deck, which is a nice number. I like that. Combines vibrant hand-painted illustrations with concepts of the shared human experience. Here, the beauty and mystery of the natural world serve as inspiration for both metaphysical and practical insights to guide you on your path of illumination. Now, there is something that I saw read, which is one of the things that sold me. Here we go. No. There is a T.S. Eliot, who I love his work. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So I love that. But there was wow, I wonder where that is. There was a quote that really said, oh, I have to have this particular deck because of this particular quote, which doesn't seem to be on the box. I'll see if I can find it, but it really sold me. It sold me to the deck. Anyways, there we go. like there's something just kind of, you can't feel it. You can see it a little bit just at the top, but I am definitely going to edge this deck. You have this beautiful, rich backing and then these beautiful, rich images, and so I'm definitely going to be, edging it. There is a copyright on the front, which I don't like on decks. This is such a beautiful backing. Like, that to me doesn't serve any purpose at all for me, and it usually annoys me. I will say, because of the texture, that you definitely don't, it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, at least, which is a plus. The cardstock is silky matte, thick but not ridiculously thick. I'll see when I shuffle it how it feels, but I think this is actually going to shuffle really nicely if I had to guess. So let's take a look at these cards. Now, I have seen some of these cards because Patrick showed me some of them when he unboxed his. I will say that especially this first card, which has the text behind it, is slightly colored, like it's a slight almost a white, but with a sheen of the turquoisey color that you see here. And whereas this one, it's not the same color, so it must kind of shift. It must be slightly transparent perhaps to go behind it. I'm not entirely sure. But I will say with this color here, unless I tilt it just right, because I don't have the best eyesight at all. And also I do have unique lighting simply because I do readings, and the way that I bounce light can also play around with that stuff. So it makes it where I do need to see it clearly, I do need to kind of tilt it a little bit to get a good clear, at least on this abundance one. So in the position that this is at, you can see that the word is abundance, but I do actually have to look pretty close. Now, let me put my glasses on, because I don't have my glasses on. And that helps, but I will say it still could use a little more contrast between the color of the font and the font itself. This is nitpicky. This is not something that would stop me from purchasing the deck, and it is by no means unreadable at all, and it just takes a slight shift. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that at all, and I'm sure not. But with just, for me, a slight shift up, and I can read it really clearly. So it's just one of those little things that I know is most likely because of my eyesight and the way that I have my lights. So you can see that there is a border, and it's not a gold foil, for which I am thankful. While I love the look of gold foil, again, because of my lighting, when I have a lot of gold foil on a card, it actually gives me a headache to have a bunch of the cards out, and it becomes really hard to see because of the glare. Also, because this is a really earthy deck, and obviously gold comes from the earth, but it's not quite as shiny as we make it, right? So this to me is actually perfect. You have that gold there, but it almost looks like there's a sheen to it, but is not a high gloss, and I don't think it's actually it's not the same as this, where you actually have a sheen where it's gilded. This is not that way, and I really like that. So here we have abundance. Now we can see that the light half of the circle is above. There is a border here, which personally I think could have just been removed and simply have just the image. To be honest, I think ideally I would have preferred it that way, because number one, I don't think these are necessary, and I think just having the keyword and no border to me would have been perfect. But this isn't my deck, this is her deck, and this is something that's perfect for her. And I can see with when having this and this, you would want to make some sort of connection. And I will also say, because it is a very muted gold, that the images that I've seen that Patrick have shared, as well as what you're just looking at it, it's not super obtrusive. It doesn't really get in the way, but it's just, again, one of those things that I would personally just prefer that to be there and nothing else on the card at all. But this isn't about my preference. This is about the creator's preferences. Abundance. I mean, I think it's stunning. I love again, the muted palette, but bold in terms of lots of colors that are going around. Leads a very earthy sense of abundance. And we have the light up at the top, which tells us that this is a positive association of fullness and accord and these kinds of things, which of course the keyword abundance tells us. Next we have one of the peoples, which I'm going to keep the people out as I go along, I like to make piles, you know. This does have the star on it, which speaks to intersection of matter with consciousness and human influence. So I'll be curious if that star is only on the human ones, and then we'll see if that's the case. But we have accomplishment, which is also positive. I really like the rabbit because he's got a card in his hand like he's a magician, and you say, okay, well, who's actually accomplished something? He thinks he's accomplished something, but maybe the rabbit did. That's what I think of. So here we have air. So I'm assuming that we are going to have the 4 elements here, and so I'm going to also set those out so we can see those side by side. And it has the origin, wholeness, completion, again, that full state of being with the elements. Beautiful mountain imagery here, clean, crisp mountain air. So I'm going to pull that aside and see that with the other elements. Next we have anguish. So there are shadow cards in this. So this is one of the things that, of course, I really love. Earth and nature and life and sort of getting into the dirt and the mud of living is not something that is without difficulties. And so I think having cards like that only makes sense. Let's read one of the paragraphs, I guess, while we're at it. Anguish. Entangled in negative emotions, the mind is ensnared. In this state, it can be difficult to see beyond the black and white bramble of suffering. Taking a step back and remembering we have the power to choose a different perspective allows us to be more at peace through difficult times. So I like the way that she's worded this, that yes, this is speaking of anguish and difficult emotions. However, we do have a choice in how we're going to deal with those emotions. So it still keeps the power of choice in the person, rooted in the person, which I do like. Now, again, we have a star here, which I'm assuming means it's for the human, but this would also go, in my opinion, into the negative associations, conflicts, challenges. So if this star is just because it's a human, again, I'm not totally sold on this. I don't think it gets in the way of anything at all in terms of reading it, but I don't know that it's really was necessary. But we'll keep going here. So here we have another human figure of attachment. And so this is being bound by choices, perhaps knowing so or not knowing so. It looks like he's holding sort of like sea anemones or mussels, or those kind of, it feels like, you know, when you're in the, I feel like it's one of those, something that grows, like a barnacle kind of thing that grows in the ocean where you step on it and it's really going to hurt in some way. But that could just be my idea. She doesn't speak in the guidebook of the image itself. It's to see what it is that you are looking at. So that can be something that's very freeing, but that can also be I do enjoy being able to see what was on the creator's mind when they created something. So I think some people really love that, like I do. Other people prefer not to see that because it allows them to just kind of wander where their mind goes. So I don't think that's a positive or a negative, because I think that just depends on the person who's using the cards. But I think that's a powerful card there. Next we have the beautiful card of balance, and it is not surprising to me that this is wholeness and, you know, abundance, that we're not abundance, wholeness and completion, and sort of that total state of being with the card of balance, and everything does, even though these are different shapes, different size shapes, everything does feel very much imbalanced. We also have a balance between the sky and the land and the sea as well, which is interesting there. So it's quite beautiful. Again, a lot of these cards are going to be abstract, and I think it's stunning. Love this blocked card. So here we obviously have, so see how this half circle is lit, the open space is at the bottom. So this indicates a more negative or more conflicting or challenging energy that is at play with the blocked card. But I love this image. I've loved having an energetically a blocked card. So yeah, it looks to me so far that all of the people cards have the star on them. And if I were to keep this system but change something, I would remove that and simply have, is this a negative or positive card? Because we can see that there's a person on there. So I don't think that, again, that that's necessary. I'm going to try to harp on it. It's just one of those things that is kind of like, I wonder if it was an idea that was started at first and then probably could have been dropped as not necessarily being necessary, or not. But I think that there's other people who might really love that. I love this card, childhood, this idea of Alice, I'm assuming Alice has fallen through the looking, because we have the T's, we have the hair. It just has that feeling of Alice falling through the looking glass, and the perspective that children can have on the world being very powerful. I love that card. Combustion. Now this is an interesting one, because I wouldn't necessarily see this as negative. It can be. The idea of a combustible fire and the burning flame can be very transformational, which she says in the guidebook, but it can also be very destructive. So for me, this could go either way, just depending on the circumstance. Absolutely stunning card, though. Here we have concealed, again, a little bit, because this has got a blue tone to the text, so it's a little difficult for me to see, actually, even when I tip it up a little bit. I would have as a recommendation for the creator, not that the creator is watching this, but my recommendation would probably be to put white text there so that it stands out from the gold a little bit more in further editions. I might actually send her a message, just because I know she's getting ready to reprint. So that might be helpful to at least state before she gets to that point. But we shall see. Anyways, I love all of what's concealed. Now again, this is a negative. This is titled as a negative. I don't actually see this as always negative. It's like there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than you might expect. And I don't see this, I mean, it is challenging. So I guess maybe that's what needs to be, my brain needs to go to, that it could be a challenging aspect, not necessarily negative. Because I guess it's challenging because you've got to go beneath the surface and see what's happening, and pay attention that there's a lot more going on there, rather than associating this with something negative. Next we have connection, which is beautiful. I like the sacred geometry here. I like, again, the connection between land, sky, and sea, which is a very Celtic way of looking at the different realms or connections of the world. So that really speaks to me a lot. I think it is gorgeous. The cosmos, I mean, you look like you're looking at a nebula going on around it. You've got various planets. You've got even the Rainbow Bridge here. It just speaks to the cosmos. I think it's gorgeous. Decay is another one. Again, I have a little bit of a hard time seeing that the title there. I think it's going to stand out a lot more in the video than it does in person. But again, I wouldn't, this is not something I would complain about. I love that the decay here doesn't look gross. And I think I saw somebody make that comment. And I don't know who it was. I haven't watched a complete walkthrough, but I've seen little snippets of things. and I feel like somebody else I might have read it actually. Anyways, I actually like that too. You do get the sense of things decaying, but it isn't a disgusting thing. It's a part of the natural cycle of things, and so it's necessary. It's a necessary part of the cycle of life here and part of the earth. So I like that you can clearly see this is about decay, but it doesn't have like, ooh, that's gross and something to be avoided at all costs. Here we have deluge, you know, you know, you talk about this buckets of rain. It's just dumping, right? The sky is dumping on us. A flooding of emotional energy may cause us to feel saturated. Again, I feel like this card could very much be used in a deluge, because what if you have it with an abundance card, and a deluge of abundance? So it's challenging to get hit by any energy in great quantities. So again, I think that just looking at this as a challenge because of how much is going and how fast that much is going, but I don't see that as being always negative, which I love. I actually like the keywords that she's choosing, because I think that they leave itself open to the situation, and whether that's favorable or unfavorable is going to depend on other cards. It's going to depend on the situation itself. It's going to depend on the person who itself as well. This destruction card, I think, is stunning. I do wish there was a little bit on the text on kind of what she sees, but she does talk about a forest fire. You can see trees, you can see smoke. This has that beautiful organic look of fire. It's a stunning card. It's absolutely stunning. Love it. Here we have a beautiful, I do really like the people card, and I often don't in decks that just have a few people, but I mean, these people cards are really beautiful. This disguise, he's dressed up like a bear. I do really love that. That disguise can, and she does talk in here in this little thing about how sometimes we're hiding behind a facade, sometimes it can give us a sense of safety, but knowing when to reveal ourselves. So it doesn't have a complete negative connotation. Sometimes we need that protection and those boundaries up of self and how other people are viewing us. So I can think that that can be a positive thing at times. But obviously not living in that entirely. So it's just a beautiful card. Beautiful. This is stunning as well. You kind of see an outline, obviously, of a stag here. And then there's like a dreamscape within there. This is beautiful. I mean, I would just love to just go there and live. It's just gorgeous. Here we have Earth. This is, to me, it almost looks like those mushrooms that grows around trees. This kind of living, vibrant, growing energy that's there. Definitely this beautiful, abstract, earthy tones there, and the greens in the center. It's just beautiful. It really is gorgeous. This is a stunning card. I'm a big fan of this sort of silhouettes in a variety of different ways, but this I think is just stunning. To be sort of sitting there in a meditative way and have this moment of epiphany is just gorgeous. But I also think there is so many ways you could go with this. Like, I think a lot about sort of an epiphany of with that star there of guidance of where to, you know, what step to take next. And I don't know, it's just beautiful. I mean, technically this could be in the people cards because that is a human shape to that. That's clearly a person. Here we have erosion. It's beautiful. You know, you definitely think of desert landscapes where there are just these amazing structures and pathways that are caused by the erosion over time, and the layers that you can see is stunning. But so I do like, again, how she writes about how patterns of repeated experience carve and sculpt our perceptions, but be aware that old conditioning can lead to things breaking down over time. So it can, again, I feel like erosion can go either way depending on what's being eroded. Here we have eruption, very much this connotation of of lava. So it's interesting that we have the deluge, which is an intense amount of water energy, but then we also have, I'm going to make a separate pile just to see if that shows out in other ways. While you do, here's fire with combustion, but we also have that fire there. Earth can be blocked energy, so I wonder if there's a sort of challenging aspect to all of the elements. Evolution, again, I love the use of sacred geometry that's here. I love the growth patterns and things splitting off and going in directions that you see there. It's just really gorgeous. Here's another beautiful person card with fertility. Definitely a very, I think, empressy kind of feel of creation and fertility. That's, of course, we have this pregnant woman that's here. Interestingly, we have sort of that base part of the brain also being lit up and kind of going down the spine, which I think is beautiful. And then the plant life also growing. Here we have the element of fire. Gorgeous. I'll stick that over here with the elements. Gifts, I love this. It's a geode. You crack open the earth and you see these most amazing things that are in the earth, and the gift of plants and flowers, but it's just beautiful. Absolutely love it. Here we have grief. Again, this is a difficult one for me to read. I'm just pointing it out here. But it is about grief. It's interesting. It's got my wolf on it. It's got that sense of howling to the moon. And we have what looks to be almost a, you know, a person that in the mate of the wolf or something that is now up in the moon that has been lost. But what I like is all of these little moons around, or these little planets, because one of the things that for me grief feels like is the sense of being shattered. Now these are very nice circles, not jaggedy shatters, but it's that, and that feeling of everything has just split apart, and it doesn't. It's not, there's not a sense of wholeness that's there. And so for me personally, that works really well. I do think that grief and anguish could be seen as very similar energies. I'm just going to read the grief. Losing someone, so it's very specific to losing someone dear, is one of the most painful transitions. And allowing ourselves to experience loss, which is more, I guess, about loss, which this is true. So if you think about, I think loss would have been a good keyword. Grief being more about loss, and anguish can come at a lot of different ways. Anguish can come from things that we're being hit with, or being overwhelmed by, or gaining things that are coming to us that can be very anguish inducing, whereas this is focused more on things that that we have lost. So that makes sense there. It's a beautiful image, of course. I love it because of the wolf and what I just stated. This is stunning for harmony. I mean, everything looks beautiful. Now again, let's just look, because I like doing these things, right? So it's how I kind of work through something. We did have a card for balance, and I do think of balance and harmony as being very similar, and words have similar meanings. So let's see. As with a moving symphony, a harmonious state of accord is reached through shared vision and attunement to a higher purpose. Working with others to achieve... that's interesting. So there we go. Think maybe of balance as more... Yes, you can have balance amongst outward things as well, but thinking of balance as being more of an individual state of balance, whereas harmony, of course, you're working with different tones and different, when you harmonize with someone, you're matching and blending different tones. So that's beautiful, and definitely speaks to different things. Love it. That's a gorgeous card. Here we have healing that we have with this beautiful image. Interesting, she has a needle and thread in hand, almost like a compass rose. Definitely an interesting with the kind of wrappings. the tattoos on the back, but there is a sense of healing here that I think works for me. That's really beautiful. Influence. What's interesting is that the influence is being shown as being challenging. We are surrounded by forces in nature that influence our psyche. Everything from astronomical events to changing global conditions. Being mindful of these ever-changing conditions help us cope with the impact they have. So I guess, again, challenging, because there is a lot of things that we are being influenced by, both positively and negatively, and being mindful and aware of those things are going to help us to navigate those. Here we have a beautiful card, Meander. I love this. I love the wandering path with this, but then you also see the path of the sun straight there, because you could take that path if you wanted to, but instead meander has that connotation of just taking your time, experiencing what you're going to experience, and not really having to take that straight path even though it's there. It's gorgeous. I love it. Another people card is Memory, which is beautiful. I love that she's kind of what looks to me like a fall leaf in her hand. I love the parakeet. Michael had a parakeet named Chip that was that color, so that's got a lot of extra connotations for me. But I like this fallen leaf. It's this remembering before something fell, and just this like connotation of memory here. Again, love the sacred geometry on some of these cards. Beautiful moon. I'm assuming we're going to have a sun. I'll leave that out in another pile. I have all these piles going. It's just stunning. I mean, I could really just say that about all these cards. Multiverse. Now this is again interesting comparatively to, what one am I thinking of? There's one, Cosmos. Yeah, Cosmos. So let's take a look. Cosmos, referred to as the fifth element. Oh, see, I didn't think of it in that term. So okay, so Cosmos is more in alignment with the fifth element of spirit in her particular deck, whereas this is the multiverse, is more the understanding that there could be multiple dimensions of reality all existing at the same time, and so all of the different layers and the ways in which everything connects across time and space, and that is something I do definitely. It's this idea of the web too. There's just so many different layers of connections. So I quite like that. And that is different than Cosmos. Love this mystery. Again, I like the sacred geometry feel to this. There is so much unknown and mystery in the world, and that isn't a challenge or negative, but it is actually just part of the way that the world is. I do like that a lot. This is gorgeous. Now, she does have obstacle and blocked, which you could kind of think of in the same, to me, those seem similar, but so far I have been impressed by her. Blocked is a dead end that has reached its and is impassable without tremendous effort. In this instance, we must decide if it's worthwhile to continue or to go around, go somewhere else. Okay, so then an obstacle, we may experience what we perceive to be a problem or a hindrance to accomplishing a goal, but in fact this issue is not as solid as it first appears. Examining our options from all angles may allow us to find a place of entry that was previously overlooked. So there is a difference between this, right there. This is, and you can even see this is going to be something that you can navigate or figure out a way around, or may actually be something that is helpful, that you can pick up this rock and use this rock. Whereas the other one looks like a cave-in happened, and the only way you're going to get through that is with tremendous effort, right? Or just go in a different direction. So I do think they do seem to be different. Love this path card. Which has got a different connotation to meandering, which is just kind of moving our way in a relaxed way, where a path is much more defined as something that we are going to. The flags here give this a feeling of more of like a pilgrimage, someplace that you are going to be going with, taking this path with a specific intention, which is gorgeous. Love this card. Patience. And this is with crystals that are so slow growing. I love it. That's just a stunning card. The colors are stunning. The crystals are stunning. That's hard to read, but it's gorgeous. Oh, this is gorgeous as well. Phenomenon, which seems very broad. Some occurrences are observed but unexplained in this life. Allow space for the unknowable to exist without fear. So that's interesting, because that seems, again, seems being the operative word, that seems similar to mystery, right? I feel like mystery and phenomenon in description could be similar, but what she does say at the end of this little snippet is those of us who have otherworldly experiences are free to draw our conclusions without judgment. So this is more like a spiritual phenomenon, something that is outside of our understanding, versus a mystery of this sort of the mystery of the universe. I do think these are closely aligned, but I could see how I would use these two in a different manner. But I am going to make a pile because I like to make piles. Here we have plants. So we have had humans, a lot of humans. I haven't seen, I don't think, any animals. Well, the bear that the human is disguised as. But I love that there is a plant. I hope maybe there's another thing to go with that. Potential is stunning with this grass and growth, and I do quite like that. And it's a good word to have in a deck. Love the productivity here with the beehive. Very powerful protection. I really like the red hand over the mouth, which I know she's not going to explain because she doesn't talk about it. But there's different ways to be safe, right? To protect somebody. And that kind of looks of a silencing of the mouth also, but, or just a primal feel to it. I don't know. I really like this image for protection of the little baby goat. It just is cool. I like it. Reflection is gorgeous, where you see the reflection of nature on the back of this woman is stunning. Reincarnation. Yeah. Yes, please. Love this. See, there's a little tiny fetus, I think. It looks like that to me, in the middle of this labyrinth. This winding labyrinth of lifetimes that we go through. Beautiful. Absolutely love it. Relationship, again, connection, things coming together, banging flint and creating fire, the double triangle. I just think that works really well. Can't read this one either. This is release. This is interesting because, again, we had release, anguish, and grief, which is loss, but release is different. That is just a letting go of something. It doesn't necessarily have negative connotations attached to it. So I do think that that works quite differently and is a beautiful keyword to have in a deck. This is a stunning card for renewal. Resilience, absolutely gorgeous. It's almost like there's this hole in a rock, and then there's all of this growth is growing, and even in a small space, this is a whole nother world is growing here. Love it. Love this resistance card. We've got these two forces sort of pressing against each other. And again, I think that that can be positive because one could be holding the other up. It can be challenging. It could go either way with that. Stunning. Responsibility with this person and the taking responsibility. Seems like of this doe, but obviously responsibility isn't the same as protective energy. It is more taking responsibility for ourselves and the things that we are responsible for. So it's to me, a different connotation. Beautiful retreat card. And I wouldn't say that this is a challenging word, but it can be if you stay too long. Separate. beautiful. This is a piece of earth that's been separated out from the earth. Separate can be not necessarily a negative. I could kind of almost see these two things being similar because they both kind of speak to moving away. Consider a temporary withdrawal from the normal routine. Allowing ourselves to step away from habitual activity and turn our attention towards self-care can help us stay healthy. So this is actually quite a positive write-up, so I'm not sure why that has the challenging aspect of this. Whereas the separate says, still, now may be the time to break free from long-held beliefs, conforming to old patterns that don't resonate with who we are. Allow yourself to be separate and make your own way. Again, to me, has a positive connotation. However, it can be challenging to do that, to go as being part of the whole and move to something that is separate. Source is interesting. Source is interesting to me in terms of we have the cosmos and the other one that I thought could be similar. The multiverse, but then we have the source, which is at the start of everything, right? That is that beginning point there, which is quite different, and I quite love the look of that. Stillness is absolutely gorgeous. Structure. Everything is very, geometrically, and it also reflects geometrically the same, so that's beautiful. Support kind of speaks for itself. It looks very supportive. So a lot of, supportive energy, responsibility, protective energy, healing, but then there's also a lot of inward things as well. So kind of inward and outward ways in which humans connect. The tempest here, again, I feel like we've had like the deluge, the tempest, the combustion, the one that was like the volcano. How is a tempest different? Like the unbridled energy released during an electrical storm, we may find ourselves in a situation that is both violent and activating. Utilize this energy with caution, recognizing it can be a catalyst to both healing and harmful outcomes. So that to me is interesting because that could, I think, go in similar ways. We're going to come back to those. I've made some piles, so we're going to come back to things. I love this transient card. Everything shifts and changes. Life is change. I think that's just part of life. The underworld. So do we have, of course, everything is kind of the upper world. I really love that card. I would have liked to see a middle world and an upper world to match, which we don't have. Upheaval. I'm gonna hold this for a minute while we come back to these cards while we finish this. And vulnerability is stunning. They don't have vulnerability as challenging. I do think vulnerability can be extremely challenging. And then we have water. Love the wisdom card. It looks like wisdom is just blossoming. So let me make a couple piles here and I will come back. Okay, so I've made a bunch of piles. I'm going to try to quickly go through this because I've talked about most of this. This is just how I process a deck, especially when it's a deck that I think I'm really going to connect with, and something I can see working into some of what I consider to be readings that I work really intensely with and have sort of deep importance to me. Like, I think this is going to be a deck that is like that. I want to understand the nuances. It's what helps me to navigate and see, is this cohesive? Is this something that's going to work on a larger scale? There are a couple cards that I think could use a counterpart, such as we do have the earth and the water and the fire and the air. Love that. I work with, and then we also have source, which could go here, although they have cosmos, I think, is more what would go as the fifth element. So we definitely have things like that that go together. There is a plants card, and obviously there is a set of 12 human cards. So I would have liked to have seen an animals card. There are some animals, like in, I think, the disruption card. There is a, the one that's kind of like an earthquake. There are some animals on it, but there's not a specific animal card, and so that would have been nice if you're going to have a card just called plants. I think that then having one called animals would be good, and maybe crystals or something like that. I think the shamanic healing deck has that, and it's really nice to just kind of quickly tap into those various energies. I also, when you have a keyword called underworld, I feel like you should then have one for the middle world and the upper world. Just because a lot of people, I think, who would use a deck that's so earthy based like this probably do work with the energies of the upper world, middle world, and underworld. And so I personally would absolutely have loved to have seen those two cards to set and complete that set. Now, to be completely fair, the middle world is everywhere in this deck. This entire deck is speaking to the middle world. And then we do have things that speak of that upper world guidance with even like the source card. So those are present in any of the ones that have to do with the cosmos and the source and even the multiverse. Those kinds of energies are certainly speaking to the upper world. But because we have one called the underworld, I would have liked to have seen those other two. We have the moon, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why there wouldn't be a sun card. Again, this is a card about illuminated earth, and what illuminates the earth is the sun. So I think that that's a little strange that that wouldn't be there. These are the people, love the people in here, and I don't often like them when it's a deck like this where I say just don't put any people in. I do think these work. I just left this out more to say I don't think, and I've said this all the way through, so I'm not going to harp on it even though I know it's going to be irritating. This is my first impression. This is my first walkthrough. This is me working out the deck, right? So I think that is everything. There are many that we've talked about through it that at first look seem, oh, phenomenon and mystery look like those might be the same, but they are not. There's nuance there. We talked about the separate and the retreat, how there's nuance there. We talked about the grief and I can't remember what the other one was, that they are actually nuanced. There are differences. The obstacle and the block, there are differences and nuances there that I think are stunning. The source and the cosmos and the multiverse have very similar feels, but they are different. This is intended to be more like the spirit or source, whereas this is the beginning of things, right? That's different. And then this is all of the fractured universes that I think that we believe are there. It's the understanding of the web, the understanding that we're connected across so many different layers of space and time, which is awesome. So a lot of the cards that at first glance you might think are repetitive are simply nuanced in a very beautiful way. Harmony and balance was another one. That's two different things, and it's beautiful and it's nuanced. I did want to touch really quick on erosion. I think could maybe stay in what I'm trying to talk about. Some of the cards do feel in some ways repetitive in terms of the big massive energy ones, but this is the illuminated earth, and so you can see in them sort of the big rainstorms, and you can even see waves here, and you can think about like hurricane energy, right? Very water-based, very emotional-based. The destructive force of a forest fire. This is a natural phenomenon that takes place, but there is this understanding that it burns out and then it paves the way for new growth. The eruption of volcanoes. This in this deck is talking more about things that we're holding in and repressing, and eventually it is going to have to burst out. The tempest is, I think, probably the most like the Tower card, where this is high-powered energy that you can either take this shake-up energy as an opportunity for growth and for sparking a light to something amazing, or it could fry you where you stand, and it could be really destructive. So it's like all this powerful energy that's there. How are you going to use it? Are you going to harness that lightning for electricity? Or, you know, is it going to burn you to the ground kind of energy? Be careful how you're working with this energy. And then upheaval is this splitting energy of earthquakes, right? So these are all things that take place in nature and do have differing effects. These are upheavals and big energies that by its very nature causes splits and renders things and divides things, and that's different energy. Or I don't know if I can talk about the erosion is just this long term, so it's destructive as the rest of these, but instead of kind of blowing in and then passing, it's just this long continual repetitive thing that eventually makes huge shifts and changes. So I just think these are, again, on first glance you might say, okay, that's a lot of destructive upheaval, powerful smashing crashing energy, but they are all very different and very nuanced and do reflect the energies that we see in Earth. And so I actually really love what's going on there. As well, I don't know why that Epiphany card was out. So yeah, so that is my sort of general feelings going through each and every one of these. I'm going to go ahead and try to shuffle and see how they shuffle. Oops. Yeah, they shuffle nice. It does, to me, feel kind of like the first edition Wild Unknown, maybe slightly more easily. The Wild Unknown, I always cringed to have to shuffle, where I don't think I would cringe to shuffle this or riffle it. It's kind of like, I think it's between the first edition and the second edition Wild Unknown. I love the first edition Wild Unknown or second edition Wild Unknown to me is perfect for shuffling. Whereas this first edition does cause my hands to hurt. This would, if I did tons of shuffling, a little bit strain my hands. But it's beautiful. I know many people love this because there are a lot less riffle shufflers out there in the world than there, I think, are overhand shufflers. And so, you know, that to me, this is beautiful cardstock. There weren't any spreads or anything that were given with this. I think I would most likely be using this in small ways. I can see myself using this in my ancestor reading, where I pull the 3 ancestors and have the 3 messages that go along with it. I could see myself using this just for a 3-card reading. I could see myself using this for the 4 element reading for sure. Especially a 4 square to cast on top of. Okay. So I could definitely see doing a, just a 3-card. Abundance, fertility, and decay. So that's interesting because it does show, because for me, if I don't do any things, this is the middle, this idea of fertility and that potential there for growth and abundance is there. But then on either side, we do have the great abundance, but with great abundance naturally comes decay. If you think about a cornucopia of fruit, and you're going to eat some of that fruit, but in the end, what's left over is then going to decay and go back into the ground to feed and fertilize the new growth. So this is a very beautiful cycle to pay attention to, that a person may be at this beginning of open and fertile for new ideas and new things to come that very well might lead to abundance, but there are going to be some things that decay and go back into the ground unused, and that's just part of the natural cycle of life. So this is really beautiful combination of cards. Again, I think another thing that you could do is, pull a 4 card. For me, it would be the 4 elements. So you could have fire, so upheaval in the level of creativity, but being careful because it could actually split. The Cosmos card in the position of the mind. This is powerful energy of source, right? In this deck, they use Cosmos, I think the way many of us would use spirit. It is what is at the heart of the universe. Just think of this universe and these kind of planets in the heart of it and these rainbows connecting to the middle. It's like, what is that energy that really is there to spark and bring about everything, but in the realm of the mind. I don't think that these are cards that are there for just like, okay, I'm going to be thinking about the beginnings of the universe here while I go get coffee today. I think these are these deep, what's going on energetically in the realm of water, which is our emotions, the need to separate ourselves out and the struggle that we have separating ourselves out. And then in the realm of earth, we actually have earth, right? So that's earth in earth, which is really powerful energy there of groundedness and rootedness and just really sinking into the practical, physical side of life. Don't get too caught up in this figuring out the meanings of the universe, but keep yourself really rooted and grounded so that you can fly that way, so that you can be careful, kind of root and ground this upheaving energy in the realm of fire. So these are strong, energetic. This would be an amazing deck to use for those kinds of readings in which you're really getting into the depth of the energy behind yourself at that time or behind a situation. They're absolutely beautiful. I'm really thrilled with them, and I think that they are going to be something that I use quite a lot in my personal practice. So that's always a wonderful thing to see. So I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I will talk to you all later.